Tonight, tear gas deployed after another clash in Chicago during President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration.
Stands under the U.S.-Mexico border to the Boone Street storm drain in El Paso. It measured
Border fence and searching for drug and human trafficking tunnels. This one discovered
snuck into the U.S. not through rural areas, but through legal ports of entry. And that's why there's an increased military presence here.
Cartel gunmen just wiped out police units at the border, turning a quiet stretch of desert into a killing ground overnight. The chaos forced the U.S. military to step in before things spiraled out of control. And now, every move on that border feels like the calm before a storm no one can escape.
The door is blown, 5 sicarios are eliminated. The squad leader finds intelligence on a laptop of the location of another cartel facility up the road.
Police call it a narco tunnel used for trafficking drugs and people into the U.S.
Gunfire cracked across the Rio Grande Valley that night. Short, violent bursts that shattered the stillness near Fronten Island. Border Patrol agents were on a routine surveillance mission, the kind of patrol they'd done hundreds of times before. But this time, something felt off. Within seconds, muzzle flashes tore through the darkness. Cartel gunmen, armed, coordinated, and unafraid, opened fire on U.S. agents. No warning, no signal, just pure chaos.
A vehicle crashed into the SUV to stop it. Chicago police say a hostile crowd started throwing objects at federal agents who then deployed tear gas.
The agents returned fire, holding their ground until the shooting stopped. Miraculously, no one was killed. But the message was loud and clear. This wasn't random crossfire. It was a declaration. The cartels weren't just defending their smuggling routes anymore. They were attacking, hunting, and they wanted everyone to know it.
U.S. authorities sealed the tunnel on this side of the border 2 weeks ago.
20th, 2025, the United States government officially designated Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
January 27th, 2025. That date is burned into every border agent's mind. What started as a single gunfight quickly spiraled into one of the most dangerous escalations in U.S.-Mexico border history. The Rio Grande Valley, once known for quiet crossings and smuggling chases, had turned into a battlefield. U.S. agents weren't facing drug mules anymore. They were facing trained fighters, men moving in tactical patterns, communicating on encrypted radios, and firing with precision that screamed military training.
Agents found a man-made tunnel connecting Juarez in Mexico to El Paso, Texas. This is according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The tunnel had lighting, ventilation, and wood bracing.
Within hours, Texas declared a state of emergency. Over 400 National Guard troops were deployed to reinforce the area. Helicopters circled the skies, floodlights swept the border, and armored vehicles rolled into towns that had never seen a military presence before. Locals watched from their porches in disbelief. For years, they'd heard about cartel wars tearing apart Mexico. But this time, the violence wasn't south of the border. It was right here, on American soil.
Feet tall and 4 feet wide. It's now under investigation with the FBI, El Paso CBP, El Paso's Police Department, Texas Department of Public Safety, the Mexican government, and the U.S. Consulate General.
The U.S. government moved fast, but behind the scenes, the panic was real. Law enforcement wasn't dealing with a criminal gang anymore. This was something else, something structured. And that's when a covert plan began to take shape inside the Pentagon. It was called Operation Sentinel Dusk.
Mexican authorities are beginning to fill the man-made tunnel next to the Rio Grande on the Mexican side of the border. Our crews in Juarez tell us that personnel from different departments began pouring concrete into the hole.
It wasn't a public operation. It wasn't even listed in official briefings. This was a joint response. Northern Command, DEA, and Cyber Command, working quietly under one objective: stop the cartels before they crossed another line. Intelligence analysts started picking up strange signals. Encrypted chatter between cartel leaders mentioning one chilling phrase: retaliation, North Americana. That one word, retaliation, set off alarms across every federal agency.
Snuck into the U.S. not through rural areas, but through legal ports of entry. And that's why there's an increased military presence here.
Because this wasn't about defending drug routes anymore. It was revenge. Revenge for something that happened months earlier. And execution that the cartels blamed on U.S. interference.
crashed into the SUV to stop it. Chicago police say a hostile crowd started throwing objects at federal agents who then deployed tear gas.
A tunnel that connects all the way from Ciudad Juarez into El Paso, which prompted a multi-agency response from both U.S. and Mexican officials.
That night in Rio Grande wasn't an isolated clash. It was the start of something much bigger. The intelligence coming out of northern Mexico painted a terrifying picture. Cartels weren't running from law enforcement anymore. They were advancing. They were testing U.S. limits, seeing how far they could push before America pushed back.
Was investigating the situation. Since then, Homeland Security Investigations says that it is believed this tunnel was constructed within the past year. Officials saying,
and behind every quiet military meeting, every coded report, there was one unspoken truth. The U.S. was preparing for something it hadn't faced in modern history, a direct military confrontation with the cartels. Because this time, it wasn't about drugs. It wasn't about smuggling. It was about power, control. And the moment a cartel bullet crossed into American soil, the border stopped being a line. It became a battlefield. And what followed next would shake the entire nation.
We're not backing down. President Trump and Secretary Noem are going to give our law enforcement the resources they need to succeed and clean up America's streets.
The president today once again touting his crackdown on crime in Democratic-led cities.
Chicago, we've already made a lot of progress despite fighting from the government.
It started with a noise, barely noticeable. A faint hum was picked up by seismic sensors near El Paso. At first, agents thought it was just another smuggler's attempt to dig a quick passage under the fence. But what they found wasn't some sloppy escape route. It was a full-blown military tunnel, 4 feet wide, 6 feet high, reinforced with steel ribs and concrete lining, ventilation ducts, lighting strips, a blueprint for invasion running right beneath the border.
Conducted an investigation of the storm drain on January 9th, where they discovered a hole behind a metal frame where the tunnel breached into the public storm drain. HSI's
When tactical teams finally breached the tunnel's southern mouth, they stumbled into something even worse. A warehouse that felt less like a smuggler's den and more like a command post. On a rusted table lay maps of Border Patrol ships, coded letters, and detailed timing charts for drone patrols. Someone had been studying the U.S. like an enemy nation. And in the corner, 3 shackled migrants, starved, dehydrated, but alive. They weren't cargo. They were collateral. Proof that this wasn't just smuggling. It was organized paramilitary trafficking. Then came the message, etched into 2 steel plates, bolted to a crate filled with confiscated rifles. We can reach you inside the Pentagon. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration, a line drawn in steel. And when those words hit Washington, something shifted. This wasn't just cartel business anymore. This was psychological warfare. And the people reading that message knew exactly what it meant. The cartels had gone from dealers to disruptors.
Their agency is working with Mexican authorities to ensure the smuggling tunnel is secure.
Cartels have always had firepower, but now they had a formation. Gone were the days of pickup trucks and hand-me-down rifles. These guys moved like trained soldiers, platoon-style formations, recon scouts, even electronic jamming gear. One report confirmed they'd blocked radio frequencies used by Border Patrol in the Rio Grande sector. That's not cartel chaos. That's electronic warfare. In just 12 hours, $24 million moved through encrypted wallets. Not pesos, not cash, crypto. The money trail vanished after funding a shopping spree. Thermal optics, drone parts, night vision, rigs. Someone was upgrading their war chest, fast.
Mexican police call it a narco tunnel used for trafficking drugs and people into the U.S.
The DEA called it militarization. The Pentagon called it irregular combat. Mexico had another word, ghosts. And these ghosts didn't just disappear into the desert, they studied satellite routes, intercepted communications, and mimicked military patterns. They weren't hiding from America anymore. They were preparing for it. By the time officials realized what was happening, the line between drug syndicate and insurgent force had already blurred, and everyone knew the next move would determine whether the U.S. saw another firefight or a full-blown war.
The tunnel was first discovered back on January 9th by Border Patrol inspecting the storm drain in the area. The tunnel led to El Paso and it runs under the Rio Grande and is supported by wooden beams and plywood. U.S. authorities.
But that explosion wasn't the end. It was the spark. Within hours, intelligence briefings lit up with warnings. Cartel cells were mobilizing. Classified memos from late 2024 had already hinted at it. Retaliation orders issued directly from Sinaloa and Jalisco bosses, targeting U.S. Border Patrol units. Those memos weren't paranoia. They were prophecy. Patrol stations from El Centro to Laredo went on red alert. Agents were told to travel in pairs, keep body armor on even off-duty, and watch their six. Because this time, the cartels weren't smuggling. They were hunting.
A pause in Trump's tariff threat is set to expire. Critics say the troops will do little to help crack down on illegal immigration and the flow of fentanyl, and instead amount to a U.S. A senior Homeland Security official says the administration does plan to keep sending migrants to Guantanamo Bay as a staging area.
By dawn, the violence had mutated into something unrecognizable. What was once border security now looked like urban warfare. Convoys of armored SUVs crossing ranch roads. Drones spotted circling low over patrol routes. Gunfire echoing from the Mexican side, answered by silence on the American one. No one wanted to be the first to admit it. But this wasn't about drugs anymore. This was about dominance, territory, message, the kind that's written not in ink, but in blood.
Absolutely no reason to have this kind of chaos happening in our communities, putting people at risk, just exacerbating the fear that people feel.
American troops and intelligence officers on the ground striking drug labs and cartel leaders south of the border. This would essentially open a new front in the president's military campaign against cartels, which is thus far focused on strikes against alleged drug-carrying boats.
And as the chaos deepened, the response grew sharper. Inside Washington, the administration debated what many considered unthinkable: direct military intervention, drone strikes over cartel compounds in northern Mexico, expanded surveillance flights, precision targeting under the banner of counter-terror operations. On paper, it was about dismantling trafficking networks, but off the record, it was revenge, plain and simple. Every burned-out vehicle, every fallen agent fueled the argument. If they can strike us, why can't we strike back?
Being on the ground in Mexico to carry those out. Now, as you mentioned, this is in the planning stages now. The president still has not given the final go-ahead for this, but the fact that they are planning for this is also notable here.
Meanwhile, along the border towns, fear turned into fury. Families packed up, shops closed, and National Guard convoys rolled through streets once patrolled by sheriffs. California, Arizona, Texas, all calling for reinforcements. But reinforcements don't fix rot. They just build a wall over it. The truth was, the war had already crossed over. The narco-civil war in Mexico had spilled into American soil, quiet, creeping, unstoppable. And somewhere in that gray zone between justice and vengeance, the balance tipped. The line blurred. Because once both nations started fighting shadows, they stopped seeing the faces behind them. And as the fire spread, one question echoed across every command room, every checkpoint, every burning border town. If this isn't a war yet, what do you call it when both sides are already bleeding?